I think one of the guys who's figured out why this doesn't make sense is Eliot Spitzer, and he explains how AIG was in the middle of all of these corrupt shenanigans in the first place, and now some are saying that Spitzer is so right, including Katrina vanden Heuvel, the editor of The Nation, that perhaps we should have him as Treasury Secretary. Now, I love that idea. I was thinking of proposing it myself, but obviously it's a joke because it doesn't matter how right you are about Wall Street, it doesn't matter how right you are about content and substance. If you have had the wrong kind of sex in America, well, you're obviously disqualified from public service. You're the most qualified to figure out who's stealing our money? Who cares? No, we're going to hand it over to a bunch of Wall Street guys instead because you slept with a hooker. Now, meanwhile, if you want to know what the reality of the situation is with AIG and how they've been corrupt and for how long they've been corrupt, let's go to clip number 2 here, guys. Spitzer on CNN, he's talking to Fareed Zakaria, also of Newsweek, and he tells them how AIG's been doing this for a long time. Let's listen.
Back then, I said to people, AIG is at the center of the web. The financial tentacles of this company stretched to every major investment bank. The web between AIG and Goldman Sachs is something that should be pursued. And as I've written...
Meaning what? Meaning that a lot of the money that we, the taxpayers, gave AIG has ended up being paid to Goldman Sachs.
Precisely.
And other companies.
The so-called counterparties to these very sophisticated financial transactions. When AIG initially received $80 billion, a decision that was a consequence of a very brief meeting of the president of the New York Fed, the Secretary of the Treasury, perhaps Chairman Bernanke, and arguably some reports say the chairman of Goldman Sachs, $80 billion, virtually all of it flowed out to counterparties, $12.9 billion to Goldman Sachs. Why did that happen? What questions were asked? Why did we need to pay 100 cents on the dollar on those transactions if we had to pay anything? What would have happened to the financial system had it not been paid? These are the questions that should be pursued. Look, bonus is a real issue. It touches us viscerally. The real money and the real structural issue is the dynamic between AIG and the counterparty.
Because those payments are in the tens of billions of dollars. The bonuses are a few hundred million.
The bonuses, we think, are $164 million, give or take. Huge money. I mean, nobody should diminish that. These counterparty payments, tens and tens of billions of dollars.
And to your mind, it seems as though that this taxpayer money may have been recklessly and unwisely paid off?
It may be that a case could be made that it should have been paid, but at a moment in our nation's history when everybody is being asked to bear a piece of the burden, everybody, people are being told work 4 days a week, not 5. Sales taxes are going to go up. Contracts are being broken and renegotiated for workers across America. Our 401ks and our savings have been depleted by the recklessness of Wall Street. For Goldman and the other counterparties not to be able to say, we can make do with only 50 cents on the dollar, 30 cents on the dollar, after we've already given Goldman a $25 billion cash infusion, they are sitting on vast amounts of cash on the sidelines, which is their right, but they're going to invest it in due course based upon their judgment. For them, on top of all that, to get another $12.9 billion in the dark, without questions, after a meeting of this sort is fundamentally wrong, and that is the nature of the inquiry that should be raised. There are many on Capitol Hill who are beating their chests so loudly you know it's just to cover up their neglect and failure over the last decade. They sat there and watched and did nothing, as they clearly should have known that we were building a system that was a house of cards. And they enjoyed it and prospered from it, and there was a symbiotic relationship between them and Wall Street.
Now, you got to understand something. I read dozens of articles on this stuff, and I try to get a handle on what makes sense and what doesn't. And when I just heard Eliot Spitzer say that stuff, it rained down like truth. Based on everything I read, what he said is exactly right. Whenever I listen to Tim Geithner, it seems like it's obfuscation and misdirection, and that he's trying to cover his ass for really covering for Wall Street. Now, in reality, I know it'll never happen, but Eliot Spitzer, how much would I rather have Eliot Spitzer as the Treasury Secretary than Tim Geithner? Only 1,000,000 times more. Because that guy cares, I don't care who he slept with. He cares about the American taxpayer. He's proven it over and over. And when he was in New York and he went after the guys on Wall Street, they called him the Sheriff of Wall Street. When he was arrested on this prostitution charge, or the news came out, I should say, on that, they popped corks on Wall Street. They drank champagne. They said, oh, thank God he's off our ass. You know who Spitzer went after originally, as you heard in the beginning a little bit there? AIG, and he got him. They were doing fraud. He said this has been going on for at least 6 years. Now, Hank Greenberg, the former CEO of AIG, says, oh, it wasn't me. It was the guys after me. He said, what are you talking about? He's the one that set up the whole system. That's why we had to drive him out. And he was an unindicted co-conspirator in the fraud of AIG. So these guys have been doing it for a long time. Spitzer's the guy who knows all their tricks, and he's the guy who's been trying to stop them well before anyone else was trying to stop them. So if you hear something from Spitzer and you hear something else from Geithner, unfortunately, the one Obama's listening to is the wrong guy.